To be honest, the original sort of drive was anything but employment. I remember the moment when we all got together and we're growing up now, we need to get an office. Then we were about to sign this lease, and then I said, guys, just let's reflect. Who is going to come in? Because I'm not coming in. So who's this office actually for? Because then we realized, actually, we're going to do this differently.
Control, Alt, Succeed.
Control Alt Succeed is proudly brought to you by Milpark Education, redefining what online learning sounds like. Visit milpark.ac.za for more information.
Well, hello and welcome to Control Alt Succeed. This is a podcast series where we explore the impact of tertiary education in shaping the next generation of active citizens, economic participants, and future leaders. Storytelling is a significant part of the learning journey. And here to tell his story is CEO of Milpark Education, Andrew Horsfall, who is also co-founder of CA Connect. Well, Andrew, hello and welcome, and thank you for giving us your time.
It's only a pleasure.
So a part of the learning journey is staying curious, and that's possibly one of your favorite sayings, correct?
Definitely. I think being curious is critical to how you think.
So I'll tell you what we've done. We've put together a little brain teaser for you.
Okay.
Yeah. We are talking about your journey as a founder. And I want to know just how much you know about founders around the globe.
Probably not as much as you're going to reveal now.
So here's what we're going to do. Let me give you an option between 3 regions: Africa, Europe, or the US.
I think I'm going to go with the US.
Good choice, Andrew.
Go for
Absolutely
safety
good
first.
choice. Now, here's the first question. He is the co-founder of Apple, but was not a tech genius.
I suppose it would be Steve Jobs.
Absolutely correct. Second question for you. One of his first sales was a game he coded and sold to a computer magazine for $500.
Elon Musk.
That's absolutely true. And then finally, of the US region of entrepreneurs, he reads at least 50 books a year.
No, that's definitely Bill Gates.
It is Bill Gates indeed. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about founders. There's a certain thing about founders, and I'd like you to just confirm that for me, Andrew. Do founders recognize each other? Is there like a special connection between people who carry vision?
Well, I think we must be careful with what we're framing as a founder here.
Yeah.
Is there commonality in founders? I don't necessarily think so. There's probably commonality in their attributes from a behavior perspective, grit, determination, those sort of things. But I think a wide range of people can become founders depending on the context they find themselves in. I wouldn't necessarily be able to pick a founder specifically, but I could probably identify the traits that's most likely to result in someone becoming a founder.
Sure. What are those traits?
Well, for me, I often laugh because, you have to kind of be a bit naive in a lot of ways because you have to go through things that if you had the wisdom of knowing what you're going to go through, you probably wouldn't do it. So you have to have this sort of belief that it can be something even though everyone's telling you it can't. And you have to just keep going and keep trucking. So there's a degree of, I suppose, persistence and grit and determination, and a passionate belief that you can do something. I think that's probably what the commonality is for most people that are founders in that sense.
Yeah. Let's come back to your journey, Andrew. At what point did you get to that moment where you realized, hold on, wait a minute, why am I in this?
Well, very soon, maybe within the first 6 months, I was like, oh, what am I doing? Because normally you're trading off opportunity sets. So you're kind of going, there's a simpler, cleaner, more obvious path in front of you. And then, there's this path that seems to be unconventional. And from the outside, no one seems to, I suppose, give space for it for you. So you kind of have to go through a lot of people like almost judging you or at least asking you why you're not doing something easier. But I think also you don't realize it's hard at the time. I think you're just doing it. There were 4 of us who founded and, very soon a 5th that joined us. And we're all very different. So I think you'd have different answers from each one of us. But for me, it's just solve the problems and you move, and you solve the problems and you move, and you just take each step at a time.
Sure.
So I think I realized quite soon that this is quite a tricky journey, but there was never a realization that it's done. I think I still to a large degree feel like it's a constant journey.
Where did all of that start?
Well, it started with the realization that I'm not a typical employee, and therefore I needed to do something outside of employment. Otherwise, I would struggle to be employed. So I think, I was kind of thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'd been doing my articles as a chartered accountant, and I'd felt very stifled doing my articles. And, you have this moment when you finish your articles and you haven't really started your formal career that
Yeah.
you have to kind of make some decisions. And I remember, my business partner was downstairs in the flat. We happened to be in flats above each other. And every day we'd get home and we'd look at each other, we can't do this, we can't do this. And we're like, what are we going to do? So to be honest, the original sort of drive was anything but employment. It wasn't so much start with education. I think that's something people miss, at least insofar as our story goes, is that it wasn't like we started off with this view that I have a passionate calling for education, and education is going to be the solution for the thing that we're going to found. We actually just wanted to start something. And we actually started 3 or 4 different things simultaneously, like just trying to figure out what would work and what wouldn't work. Some of them failed, some of them brought a lot of stories. But the one that we tended to get right and figure out was the education one. And then, we adapted and learned and kept building.
Did you ever stop to ask yourself what it is about employment that made you uncomfortable?
No, I actually at that point felt like there was something wrong with me because I didn't have the wisdom or the guidance to go, I'm different. And I actually think a lot of people in that space, if they were honest, would felt similarly in some sense. So it started with me thinking there's something wrong with me, and I struggled to hold jobs in a lot of ways because not because of dysfunction, more just because I asked too many questions, I challenged the status quo, all these sort of defiant behaviors, but they were really just provoking questions about what didn't make sense to me, but it makes me hard to have as an employee. That's what I've realized in retrospect. At the time, it just felt like I was rubbing against society the whole time. And then, I was just felt uncomfortable. And so I just wanted to do something for myself.
And when then did CA Connect start?
Well, we actually, at the end of articles, we were sort of scheming for what we we're going to do the following year. We had this idea around, training chartered accountants. There was a clear need in the industry. We had come out of academic articles. One of the other reasons of trying to avoid employment, what you can do as an article clerk is you can choose to elect to do one of your years as an academic trainee in the universities as opposed to at the audit firms. And so we chose to do that. At least I chose to do that as a way of delaying going into the corporate world. And so we got quite a lot of experience with education at that point. And it was clear to us that given the current state of CA education in South Africa, there was an opportunity to do something different. At that point, there were no private providers training chartered accountants. The success rates in particularly in a particular subset of students that were not the most academically capable necessarily. And I don't have you've heard my conversations before. Like I don't have put a lot of faith in marks, but they would like not for really realizing their full potential, and we felt like there was an opportunity to support them. So we kicked off with a support program.
Sure.
So that was kind of the early days of how we got going, just as essentially a glorified tutor hall, really.
That is absolutely phenomenal because I think a lot of people underestimate the value of actually putting people who are passionate about a subject matter together and how that could actually be an ideation lab more than it is anything else. Did you ever experience that at all?
I think the biggest success wasn't really about the subject matter expertise and the skill we had, because we didn't really have a lot of experience teaching. I think stereotypically we were probably the least likely to be the teachers. But I think the real value was that we were going to challenge the status quo. And I think there was a lot in education that you could challenge in terms of the status quo. And then in the challenge and the reflection and the learning comes the insight. And so I suppose the idea was that we had a team of people that we put together the four of us, and we had to figure out how to work with each other, and then we had to figure out how to teach people. And because we had no preconceived ideas, we could start at the beginning again and then unlock things that people hadn't unlocked yet.
What was the thought process behind who to bring together and what roles they would play in this new baby that you were forming?
Started off with friends with a common problem. We needed someone that could sort of carry some academic rigor at that point. So one of the partners we sort of headhunted because we felt like he at least could carry us from a credibility perspective. But largely we were just friends, and we
Yeah.
got together and we had this sort of problem that we could see, and we were like, let's figure it out. So even like, we joke about the subject matter expertise, but stereotypically in CA education, you've got four sort of subject areas. It's changing now, but that was what it was at the time. You have management accounting, financial reporting, taxation, and corporate governance and auditing. And we all had to, there were four of us and there were four subjects. We had to kind of like figure out who's going to do what.
Yeah.
So the guy we brought on, who was the sort of academically credible one, he got to take financial reporting because it was his baby, and we needed him to lead the charge. And then there were three subjects left between three of us. And circumstantially, I had studied my master's in finance at that point. So I got to have a veto and take management accounting and finance. And then the other two had to basically ching chong chat between each other as to which one they got. And that's so unconventional if you think about it, because they're these two guys that you could have gone either way in terms of what they taught.
Yeah.
Because it was never about what they taught. It was about how they taught. And I think that was the difference in what made us successful at the end of the day.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about that, because I do think that, the method is a significant part of your success story. How did that develop, and what was your differentiator at the time?
Well, our first differentiator was that we were 100% free.
Very big differentiator.
Well, you'll be surprised. I think my first learning was that something intangible like education, people don't trust if it's free. So we had gotten funding because we'd applied to our professional body for funding, and they decided to sort of sponsor us for a year, which meant we could bring students on board for free. But try market a free educational offering, and you realize not so easy. So despite it being free, it was pretty hard to sort of fill the class. And I think we started with something like 60, 70 students in our first year. And then we got going. And I think, you ask, how did we start to figure out what made us different in terms of our education? For me specifically, it was at the end of the first year. I remember, doing student surveys and getting feedback as to sort of the quality of my teaching. And it was really, really bad. Like we had to have a big sit down, and everyone like looked at me and going, Andrew, what the hell's going on? Like, no one thinks you're a good teacher, and we're supposed to be a teaching business. And I was thinking, maybe I should just go back to my original plan, go be an analyst or go into investments or whatever, and rather than this teaching thing, which no one seems to value.
Sure.
But then you kind of like forced to reflect, and you got to go, okay, well, that's objectively true. People are saying this about you. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what about the way I'm going about this is not helpful to the students? Then you start trying to deeply empathize with the student's experience. And then what sort of came to me was this insight that the way I think is actually quite different. And I was assuming people were like me. And if I'm going to teach people that are different to me, I need to understand what they need to know. And then I started sort of breaking down systematically how I think and why I think the way I do. And then I started realizing, it's premised on a contextual understanding. It's premised on being bold. And then I realized, actually, I'm self-assured. Why am I self-assured? Okay, I've been raised a certain way. I've been given certain gifts, whatever it is. But how do I help students become more self-assured? Because they're actually, and we've spoken about this before, in my mind, they're actually academically insecure. Why are they academically insecure? Okay, well, you can argue it's historic context or whatever it is, but my role as a teacher is then to establish security in them. And if I can establish security in them, then they can feel safe. And if they feel safe, they can start to learn, and they can start to take risks, and they can start to trust me, and they can start to walk a journey with me, and then I can start to influence and shape them. And so for me, it like when you really go back to, what they would call, I suppose, first principles, you sort of get to that point and you say, okay, well, get that right. And then we started doing that. And then we actually all collectively started doing it. So it wasn't just me. We as a team sort of recognized this as being a real thing. And then from that day onwards, it's like, okay, let's not worry about what they know. Let's worry about who they are and how we establish them. And then that was the missing ingredient. And for me, that is a big missing ingredient in education in general, is
Sure.
that it's so fundamentally connected to a person's psychological position. And if we can establish that well, then they themselves can learn for themselves.
Yeah. So in a sense, you stumbled on what I, from the outside, would term your life's call, really, which is recognizing the blockages in the education learning journey and bringing solutions to it.
I think this is much deeper than simply education. I think it speaks to philosophy of life, wanting to know truth, wanting to be able to reflect on truth and grow. And I think for me, it's threaded in everything we do. It's threaded in the culture of Milpark now and how we lead here at Milpark. So I think it's simple. It's too simple to think it's just education, but the application of that in an educational context has disproportionate outcomes for students.
Andrew, what did it take out of you to get to that point where you say, okay, the complaints are not personal. There is a learning, there is insights that needs to be harvested from this. And the sooner I get on with it, the better. What did it take out of you? And I ask this question because I think a lot of potential entrepreneurs get stuck when the journey starts demanding out of them, the solutions that are available, but actually demand a lot more humility and submission to the process.
Well, I think that's key to all success. It's this idea that we are ultimately not necessarily able to see the truth and we need to hear it. And in order for you to build and grow, you need to be able to build and grow based on true information, right? So I often talk about, is your identity connected to what people are saying about you, or is it connected to sort of an independent truth? And so for me, and this is what I often say to my students, that if you want to become something, you've got to be able to free yourself from everyone else's views, and you've got to then say, okay, I need to go and find the truth. And sometimes, the truth cuts, but it's still the truth. And whether you want to avoid it or not is up to you, but the embracing of that is what sets you up for success. So that's true of all people, in my opinion. And that goes back to that philosophy I was talking about at the beginning, which is, this is much deeper than just education. But I think if you want to be a founder, in the way we've framed this, you need to be able to have your best foot forward, which means you need to be able to hear the truth. Because if you don't hear the truth, then you're going to make mistakes based on presumptions around how things are. So it is hard, and I've seen this particularly in leading people now in this season of my life, where my responsibility is to show them the truth, despite it being hard. And you can do that with grace and with kindness. You don't have to be harsh about it. But the quicker you do it, the more you show them the truth, the more they can adapt. And I think, the pain of hearing truth is far smaller than the value you get from hearing truth. And when you figure
Sure.
that out with your life, then you can start this treadmill that sets you up for success.
When you're doing something that you're really passionate about, you don't always recognize the impact that it has on other people because you're busy enjoying yourself. You're busy doing the thing that comes naturally to you. Did you ever in the journey actually recognize yourself as a founder of something quite significant?
No, I'm not an achiever in the stereotypical sense. Like, I don't look for external validation of moments of success. So for me, no, I never really, I still don't. It still feels surreal. People say, oh, you've done this thing. Have we? Have I? I can still see all the things we still need to do, and it's not quite finished. And but I do think we're very blessed in education, because education, you directly impact people, not indirectly. And a lot of the times students, not always, but a lot of the times they voice it. And so you do get these sort of anecdotes, particularly, you know, I suppose at exam time, or at least when the course finishes and people get, succeed, and when they fail, and they reach out and they tell you that, you've had this amazing impact on their lives. And then it's like, oh, okay, especially in our world, because a lot of this was all done online. You have this influence on people where you don't physically see them, so you don't know how many people you're influencing.
Sure.
I like to think it's just like 10 people in front of me. But yeah, so I've never really felt like we've achieved that. that everyone sort of makes us out to have
Yeah,
achieved.
yeah.
But I definitely get a lot of validation from students giving feedback around the impact that we're having.
Yeah.
Which we do get a lot of. I will say that, and that's very, very rewarding.
Andrew, share with us some of your insights learned in particularly the times when you had hit challenges in the journey. And maybe if you could break that down to the times when you hit the challenges individually and when you had to solve those challenges as a team.
Well, the success of this is of Sear Connect, the business, is fundamentally connected to the ability to create a team. We all played our role, and I think for me, the most challenging moment, we were still young as a team, and we hadn't really forged a team. We hadn't really forged a degree of empathy, and we got to a moment where the whole thing was going to collapse. In other words, we were fighting, and we were struggling to understand each other, and we decided to get sort of I would say, a coach to come in and to sort of, I suppose, counsel us all. And it was the most eye-opening moment for us because obviously our hearts were all in the right place in the sense that we wanted this thing to work. All of us independently wanted this thing to work, but we were all struggling. And we went through this sort of experience where they revealed to us our sort of inherent personalities. It was so eye-opening because we all realized in one moment, and literally like a moment, like imagine day before, and then we went through this sort of 2-day journey, and after that, it was like chalk and cheese. Everything just dissolved away. And it was because we suddenly realized that everyone is not us. And that was true of all of us. You know, I was imposing my own view of the world on everyone, expectations of everyone. They were imposing their expectation of the world on me based on who they were and who I was. And then we realized just by going through this exercise, you know, we talk about we're all so diverse, but there's this element of like needing to really understand how diverse we really are. And when we did that, I mean, I like how ironic is this? So our first employee, who actually I would call a co-founder because she started so soon in the business, so she's been through the whole journey with us. I remember like thinking we need to appoint someone. I'm like, we must make this work. Our first employee, it's a big moment. So let's like try and make her job as enjoyable as possible. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look at all the things that we need to do, and all the stuff that's rubbish. Like I wouldn't want to do that. What we'll do is we'll shield her from it, and I'll do it because I want her to have the most incredible
Pleasurable
experience,
experience, yeah.
which is rational and logical, right? And then after this experience, I realized, you know what's so ironic? She hates all the things I'm giving her because the things I love to do, she struggles with. And the things I hate to do, she loves and gets feedback and affirmation from. And I was like, how weird is this? I've just literally employed our first employee. I wanted this to be as successful as possible. I set it up in a way that was going to collapse it by virtue of me being altruistic and doing things I really did not want to do to try and protect it because I was using my own lens to see what she would want. And then that was like eye-opening. And so literally we just changed the responsibilities the next day, and she was like so relieved and I was so relieved, and we went on, And that's a simple example, but actually for all of us it was like, just this sort of vision opening up of like, oh, and then it changed, and that changed entirely how we ran the business, how we employed people, and how we saw our students. And because suddenly we're like asking with curiosity, who really are you? And actually it created the space to say, we don't all have to be this one thing that society says we need to be. It created the space for us to go, you know what, I'm not good at those things, but I'm really good at those things. And then if we can have that honest conversation, suddenly we can put a team together that plays to everybody's strengths. And the minute we did that, suddenly we were getting the best of everyone in the team, and then the things just started flying. It is fundamental to how we see people and leadership, and it's gone into the culture of Milpark. It's gone into the culture of how we lead here. It's even in everything we do because it's just, to me, so existential to a company.
Andrew, let's talk about the sacrifices that are demanded by the journey.
I'm not the right person to ask that question. Often my wife laughs at me. She's like I don't. If I'm enjoying my work, I don't see it as work, and then she's like, but you're definitely working. And I don't feel like I'm working. I've always been able to keep balanced. I've never had a season where I felt out of balance. So sacrifices in the sense of work-life balance, I've never had that.
Sure.
But my founders, some of them have had that. And again, the irony behind it is that it's also connected to who you are as a person, because the number of hours spent trying to tell this particular person to stop working, slow down, and have a work-life balance, yet he couldn't. So it's interesting because it's not by virtue of the pressure or the expectation, it's by virtue of self or personal personalities. So for me, I don't really directly relate to that, to be honest. But there are sacrifices in a broader sense, in that I suppose your trajectory slows in a relative sense, and you kind of always like doubt yourself because if the thing collapses, you, I suppose, behind the curve from a relative perspective. So you kind of do feel a little bit of the that as a sacrifice at the time. But in a lot of ways, this particular journey has been enabling for us because we built it. We were quite early on with work from home. I mean, literally, goes back 15 years now, and we've never once had an office. So we were work from home 15 years ago. I remember the moment when we all got together and like, we're growing up now, we need to get an office. And then we like, you know,
Oh, wow. How
and
do
we're
we
like, let's
even
be looking around
start?
for this office, and we're about to sign this lease. And then I said, guys, just let's reflect. Who is going to come in? Because I'm not coming in. So who's this office actually for? And it ended up being for the one founder who thought we needed an office. I was like, well, you can come into this office if you really want to. And then we're like, okay, well, let's not get this office. And then that was kind of like a moment, because then we realized actually we're going to do this differently. And then we built a culture from that day on the basis of not coming into office. That didn't mean we don't value sort of together time and ensuring that we're present and ensuring that we connect. But it was more just building the fluidity of life, And it's also connected to the idea that I think the reality of the working world going forward is that there's a much stronger mix between work life and home life.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to create the space for that in our staff. And I think that becomes appealing for our employees too. So in a lot of ways, I benefited from this because, when I was having children, I was often very present. So in a lot of ways, we talk about this, what sacrifices. I think I've had a good ride.
Sure. Maybe what you might want to do at some point is just go back to the journey, Andrew, and reflect and send out a manual. Because I think a lot of people actually struggle with all the sacrifices that are demanded by the journey.
I think if you are going to be a founder, the buck stops with you. You have to solve whatever problem you have to solve. And you don't get to just say, oh, well, I'm going to take it, I'm going to end at 5 or whatever. You have to solve the problem in front of you. One of the advantages we had was that there were 4 of us, 4 capable people, and 5 early on. That essentially meant we had 5 people willing to solve problems, which means you share that load, which makes it much more sustainable. I often say to people, if you want to be a founder, from my perspective, build a team, because there's only so much energy, only so far you can run with the baton, and then you kind of want to hand the baton over and then recover a bit. And so let's say we have 5 people. You don't need 5, maybe 3, but you need to be able to say, I'm running this, I'm sprinting, then I'm handing the baton.
Sure.
And then you recover. And then by the time that person gets tired, you actually got your energy back and you're willing to take the baton on. And so you have this almost constant drive to move the business forward. But the individual people are playing like a catch and release game where they can just recover.
Sure.
And I think that makes it much more sustainable. If you asked me, could I have done it and just run? No, I don't have that staying power. I think I would have got tired and I would have got bored, but by having people who are prepared to do that, I think it makes it so much simpler.
And at some point, you expanded and you merged with Milpark Education. Take us through what influenced that decision and what it looks like now.
Well, from start to Milpark was quite a long journey, in the sense that we actually originally did a joint venture with Monash University, Monash, South Africa. And Monash, South Africa was based in Johannesburg. So there's a phase of the CA Connect story that's worth sort of thinking about, which is disconnected from Milpark. And we flew to Johannesburg every single day. Each person flew once a day for probably 3-4 years, building sort of the CA Connect brand and the CA Connect story in Johannesburg. So that was sort of this intervening phase. And then after that, we structured this deal with Milpark. Why? We were never a sustainable business without a higher educational partner. We needed a higher educational partner. Would I have loved to have done this myself without a higher educational partner? The parts of me would have said yes, but I think in retrospect, there's a whole bunch of governance and structure that the partner provides that I didn't really want to have to get involved in.
Sure.
So I think in a lot of ways we better off for the journey that we've taken.
Of course.
But at any stage along the way, we were actually partnering with higher educational institutions to build the CA Connect brand, not separately.
Let's talk about the fun times in the journey. Surely there were fun times in the journey.
We have always had fun. I'm not the most lively person, but my co-founders were, and so I always felt like this was half a laugh the whole way through, and I still value that to this day. I mean, I can come across as quite intense at times. People struggle with me,
Yeah.
and if you look at the personalities that we had in the team, we all played a different role, and some of the people in the team, I mean, they played a much bigger role than just this, but this is an important role they played, which I only reflected on and processed in retrospect, was that because they could laugh and joke and tease me and tease the other founder who was also quite intense, it humanized us to everybody else, and it allowed us to be more survivable to the rest of the business.
Sure.
Like, don't worry about Andrew, he's a bit crazy, like he's got some good ideas, but and actually in retrospect, I don't think we would have done it if you if you'd removed the humor
Yeah.
from it, you would have removed the humanity from it,
Mm.
and then you would have been left with very effective, functional, but impossible to build business because you wouldn't have had the team. And you need the people with you, which means you need the humanity with you, which means you need. So ironically, humor plays a much more important role than people realize when you process it through that lens. So if you asked, do we have fun? Yeah, we had a lot of fun, largely instrumented by other people, but I enjoyed it nonetheless.
If you had to describe the journey itself in a nutshell, how would you describe that?
Complicated. Do I have regrets? No. When I reflect on decisions in the past that might cause me regret, I ask myself the simple thing, which is, if I had known what I'd known then, would I have made a different decision? And that's what I should regret, is that I wasn't wise in the decision at that point in time. But that's very seldom true, because normally the only reason why things didn't play out the way they did was because there's new information. And you've got to do the best you can, not knowing everything. You've got to recognize that you're not going to know everything. So for me, I don't really have any regrets, but the journey has been very fruitful. My whole identity has been forged by this journey. My leadership style has been forged by this journey. My belief around how business works, how people work, my family, I think everything's become connected to the journey that I've been on. So you don't get to strip it out and ask questions about what could have been if that one leg wasn't there.
If you had to make a prediction and a projection of what the next 10 years are going to look like, what would that picture look like?
There's a season where I'm adding value in Milpark, and that season will end. I'm a catalytic person. I like change. I like to think about how the world can be, and I want to push the business to a new place. But I think, in a couple more years, I don't know how long, I mean, that always is a growing number, but the challenge is going to become less for me, and the business is going to become more stable, and it's going to move into a more stable season that requires a different type of leader.
Sure.
And then I want to be able to step away well and hand the baton over to someone that I think that can run for the next season. Because again, it goes back to different personalities. There's a season for a person like me, which I think is right for now. I deeply believe that I'm in the right place right now, particularly for Milpark. But then there's going to be a season that is wrong for me, for Milpark, and then I need to move on to something else. How that plays out for me personally is going to just evolve. I'm not one of those people that have to have a very clear path into the future. I believe in myself and my ability to adapt as it comes through. But I can say that the season will end for me at Milpark. But how far from now? I mean, I kind of keep saying 3 to 5 years, and then everyone asks me 2 years later. It's like 3 to 5 years, because there's always these things, and things move slower than you think, and so 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years it is. That is our guest in studio, a CEO and co-founder of CA Connect, CEO of Milpark Education, Andrew Horsfall, has been our guest today, talking about all things the founding journey. The Founders Series is here to educate, inform, challenge, and certainly inspire. Thank you for choosing Control, Alt, Succeed. It's been an incredible conversation. We look forward to more of these. Now stay curious and keep learning.
Control Alt Succeed.
Control Alt Succeed is proudly brought to you by Milpark Education, redefining what online learning sounds like. Visit milpark.ac.za for more information.